The Old Testament shares terms and ideas with the ancient Near Eastern pagans. And we talked a little bit about this last week. This should not be a surprise because there are similarities between the conception of how the world that we experience was made that are shared with Israel's neighbors. We see these terms as metaphorical, the terms that I'm going to cover tonight. We look at them, you know, when the Old Testament says something like that the sky is supported by pillars. Oh, that's just metaphorical. It's just poetic. To us it is, and you know why? Because we have a scientific worldview. That's why. They didn't. They were serious. No ancient person ever scaled a mountain. Do you realize that? Like the tall mountains? Because it takes oxygen, they freeze, I mean, all this kind of special equipment. There's no record that any of them ever did it. Okay, it wasn't until the 15th century that we have, you know, the whole issue resolved of can you sail this way and come out the other, you know, the whole idea about the Earth being a globe and all that kind of stuff, that was debated up into the 15th century. We look at that and go, oh, you know, it's just poetic. It is to us. But what I'm going to say is, again, back to my introduction, if you take it literally, you have to give them the benefit of the doubt. They were serious about it. All these concepts and even some of the terms are part of ancient Near Eastern cosmology. In other words, what I'll show you tonight, the division of the world, what the world looks like in Israelite cosmology, you can find the same descriptions anywhere else. Egypt, Mesopotamia, you know, ancient Syria, the Hittites, whatever. Because this was a common worldview. This is what it would look like. I didn't make this graphic, which is why it looks cool. Okay? Somebody gave this to me because they hated, honestly, at Western, they hated the one I used, and so they gave me this one. This is a three-tiered cosmology. There's God. We're going to see it in the verses I'll show you that God lives above the vault of heaven, firmament. And in the firmament you have windows and doors. And you have the earth. We're going to see verses that talk about the ends of the round, flat earth here. Underneath is Sheol. Sheol can be both the grave, and it can also be the underworld. Okay? It's not quite hell, but it's sort of like hell. We can talk a little bit about it. And then underneath that, we have the great deep. These are all scriptural terms that are on this map. This is what an Israelite, an Egyptian would have had different terms, but the same three-tiered level. Same with the Mesopotamians. Now they have, theologically, they have dramatically different views of what's going on here. Not just who made it, but what's going on. Views of afterlife, the value of humanity. I mean, it's dramatically different. And I've made the comment before, Genesis is about theological messaging. And there are some dramatic differences in what Israel is saying, the Bible is saying, and anything else. So let's take a look at the parts. Waters above and below the heavens. Genesis 1:6, God said, let there be an expanse. Some translations have firmament. It's rakia in Hebrew. In the midst of the waters. And let it separate the waters from the waters. And God made the expanse, the rakia, and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse. And it was so. And what was that expanse called? Heaven. The heavens, the sky. Shemayim in Hebrew. So you have here the sky. And you have waters above the sky. And of course you've got waters below down here. But then you have the atmospheric heavens as well. Psalm 148 mentions the waters that are above the heavens. That's after the flood. Did you catch that? Because a lot of people want to say, oh, the waters above, they went away with the flood. See, the firmament was this canopy thing, and it was there, and then the flood, it just went away. No, it wasn't. According to the psalmist, he's still referring to it. Proverbs 8, when he established the heavens, I was there. When he drew a circle on the face of the deep, isn't that interesting? We'll get to that circle on the face of the deep. when he made firm the skies above. Made firm is amatz in Hebrew. It is the same verb for letting a tree grow firm, hard. Ancient cosmology across the board believed that the sky was this dome over the earth, and it was solid. Kind of like the Truman Show. Okay? They believed that the stars were affixed to it. Some of the stars never moved, but other ones did. And the ones that did, this is why the word stars is attributed to the sons of God and to angels in biblical literature. They believed that the stars were animate beings, that they were really divine beings, and then they'd come to earth as angels, but they lived up there. And those were the ones that moved. Why? Because movement shows what? If something moves, it's alive. Okay? Again, they can't take a rocket and go up and check it out. They believe that this is there's a solid expanse over them. Another passage, Job 37, verse 18. Can you, like him, speaking of Job, drawing the dramatically poor comparison of God and Job, of course we know who's going to win there, but can you, like him, spread out the skies hard, chazak, hard as cast metal? Mutzak, that's a metal mirror. Mutzak is the same word used in the casting of the laver, the tabernacle where they would wash. It's solid. It's also the same terminology used for flint rock. Again, these passages point to the belief that there's a dome, the sky's a dome, and it's solid. And God lives above it, we live below it. Job 22, did I skip one? No, I didn't. But you say, what does God know? Can he judge through the deep darkness? Thick clouds veil him so that he does not see, and he walks on the vault of heaven. That's where God lives. It's his address. And before we think, oh, that's quaint, how cute. We think that, don't we? If a little child would ask you, where does God live? Up there. Is there something wrong with that answer? I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Use it, because there's a sense that God lives off planet. Why? Because he created the earth for us. He doesn't need it. He's independent of it. He transcends it. That's all it is. It's very normal. Amos 9:6, he builds his upper chambers in the heavens and founds his vault upon the earth. The vault upon the earth. Who calls for the waters of the sea and pours them out on the surface of the earth? The Lord is his name. And Psalm 29, the Lord sits enthroned over the flood. Again, I told you I'm going to be a flaming literalist tonight. I'm going to say that I'm going to take them absolutely at their word. Vault of the heavens, pillars and mountains. The pillars of heaven tremble and are astounded at his rebuke. Oh, that's just metaphor and poetry. Yeah, to us it is. If you ask them, it's like, well, there's that big mountain thing. I mean, that's holding up the sky. Duh. If you don't believe it, go find. I mean, how are you going to find out any different? Obviously we can, but the means to do that isn't with them. 2 Samuel 28, the earth reeled and rocked, the foundations of the heavens trembled and quaked because God was angry. Windows and doors, and that day all the fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the windows of the heavens were opened. The fountains of the deep and the windows of the heavens were closed. Psalm 78, yet he commanded the skies above and opened the doors of heaven. Again, familiar phrases. Pillars under the earth, supporting the earth. Again, look at the language. For the pillars of the earth are the Lord's, and on them he has set the world. You betcha. It's not Marduk. It's not that silly Ta in Egypt. It's Yahweh who did that. Isn't that amazing? I mean, an Israelite would want you to marvel. He would think you're insane if you didn't. Either that or a pagan. Job 38:4. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? On what were its bases sunk? Or who laid its cornerstone? He set the earth on its foundations so that it should never be moved. To him who spread out the earth above the waters. Again, think of the circle with the earth in the middle. For his steadfast love endures forever. Now, that is a very brief overview of Old Testament cosmology. But the message I want you to take away again is Genesis is about theological messaging. And if we look at Genesis this way, it doesn't matter that Genesis and the rest of the Bible is littered with this kind of cosmological language, because God didn't bother to change the culture. He could have if he wanted to. He didn't care. If he had cared, he would have done it. The only other conclusion is that he couldn't, and then you have a problem with omnipotence. God doesn't care. I'm coming to these people at this time, in this place. It's second millennium BC. They don't know it's BC yet because Jesus doesn't know. But it's a long time, okay, way back. And I'm going to give them a message, and they're going to do the best they can under my influence to express it. I'm going to watch as they write. If they goof up, I'm going to send somebody along. Go fix that. If they didn't quite get it right, somebody will come along and clean that up a little bit. When it gets done with the process, God can look at this thing we call the Bible and say, good job. It's pretty good. I'm satisfied with that. But all of that content is fixed in a particular worldview that we don't have. Okay, we have to let it be what it is. And let God's decision to do it that way settle with us. And my challenge to you is try it. Okay, if you do that, you don't need to justify it to science. They need to justify why they're criticizing it for not being what it was never intended to be. And that would be an interesting conversation. Don't accept that the way they articulate the debate.
All right, that's where I'll end that. So, clearly, Dr. Michael Heiser fully acknowledges that the Bible absolutely argues in favor of a still flat circular earth with a dome over it. I mean, let that sink in, guys. Go read this guy's bio. A Semitic language expert acknowledges that the Hebrews had the same cosmology as the ancient Near East, which was just the same way it's depicted in the Logos Bible software picture. Now, all the stuff that I've been referring to in this broadcast so far came as a result of me trying to confirm that Logos actually made that picture, because I've used that picture quite a bit, and people get creative with Photoshop sometimes, so I wanted to make sure that was a legitimate image created by Logos Bible Software, which is a highly respected Bible tool software program. So as I'm searching to confirm that that was in fact created by Logos Bible Software, I'm finding all these articles that I've been referring to in this broadcast so far, and then I found this video of Michael Heiser saying that. Now, I said it, and people mocked me, and they dismissed it, and they stated that the whole biblical flat earth thing, that was just a myth that showed up a couple hundred years ago to make Christians look stupid. No, guys. It was the dominant view of the ancient world. Face it, that's what it was until about 1,500 years ago. And this is confirmed, again, by a highly educated intellectual who's one of the big content contributors to Logos Bible Software. Okay, so again, if you don't want to believe me, the village idiot, then believe him. Now, that said, he was, you heard him in the previous session there, say that Genesis is about theological messaging. He's basically making the case that the Bible is just there to give us theology, how to understand our relationship with God. Well, hey, that's true, but the creator of the cosmos told several authors, and he read a bunch of them, and I put a whole bunch more in the stuff that I wrote long before I ever read any of his stuff. The Holy Spirit inspired these guys to describe the earth a very specific way. Mike says, well, God never felt the need to correct them in their apparent wrong interpretation or understanding. Well, wait a minute. Why would God have to correct them? He's the one that inspired them to write it in the first place. You'd have to correct himself. He's the one that told him to write it that way.
This was the Hebraic concept of the universe, and they were not alone. Like I said, there are many other cultures that believe the same thing. So looking at our whisper down the line, we have the guys toward the source material saying, we are on a circular, still flat Earth set on pillars under a dome, within which are the sun, moon, and stars. We get to the end of the line where we are today, and I heard we live on a spinning heliocentric ball in an ever-expanding universe. Huh.